Welcome. It's May 11th. This is SIG Windows weekly uh, meeting, and this is a CNCF meeting, so we will be following the CNCF guidelines and code of conduct. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to myself or Jay. Mark is out on leave for a few weeks, so myself and Jay will be leading the meetings for the next few weeks. So if you have any questions or concerns or things that you were following up with Mark, he gave me access to quite a few of his PRs. So if there's any comments or questions there, you can let me know and I'll address that. Go ahead and start with intros. I think I see a few new folks. We typically try to start off and have new folks introduce themselves and say why they're here, why they're interested in SIG Windows, what they're trying to get out of the meeting if they're interested. So I'll leave it open there if anybody's wants to speak up. Okay. Then we'll move on to announcements. Enhancement freeze. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, my bad. I had like a double mute. So hi everyone, my name is Nuno do Carmo. I'm first time I'm here on SIG Windows, even though I've been sometimes using and blogging about Kubernetes and Docker also, of course, on also on Windows. So today I'm just here. I will be joining normally the next ones also. I'm here just to see how I can let's say learn first and also contribute and help. Yeah, that's it. That's me.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Nuno. If you want to get involved in something, let me know. Feel free to poke me after the meeting. We're always excited to have new people join us, and we've got all sorts of stuff. If you want to dig in and get involved and start contributing somewhere, we're happy to help you.
Will do. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, so KEP's enhancement freeze is this Thursday. We have 3 that we're tracking that I'm aware of. The host process one, I think that we're in agreement on the final item, and we're just waiting for review from SIG API. But I think we're generally pretty close to getting that merged, the actual implementation merged. Aberrant, are you on the call? Do you want to give a quick update on Logviewer?
Yes, so the Logviewer KEP has merged. I was able to satisfy Tim Hawkins' request for heuristic-based approach for getting the logs instead of specifying whether it's a log file or a journal. So that's merged. Me and Christian Glombeck from Red Hat, we're trying to get that implemented for 122.
Cool. Congratulations, Arvind.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots of hard work there. Thank you.
It only took a few months.
And then the other one, we're not specifically driving this, but been participating in the PSP conversations. And so we had a meeting last week. It was a special SIG auth meeting for PSP. And I think we came to agreement that we should be running Windows under the baseline policy. And then also privileged will work. And then if the kubelet and the runtimes allow it and strip out the Linux specific fields, then you would be able to run it underneath the restricted profile as well. And we will be moving forward with the runtime classes for doing exemptions, similar in the way that they're doing it for Linux. And I think there's one concern there that people should be aware of is that if you are using Docker shim and you use the runtime classes, it would potentially be possible to bypass the essentially give a Windows shim or Windows runtime class and have that and manually schedule it using node names and land it on a Linux node and essentially bypass all privileges. So that's a concern that they've called out in the KEP there. We've also been working with the Gatekeeper community and have identified like a two-phase approach to eliminating things or risks like that. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop a link into the PR where we discuss that for Gatekeeper.
James, as far as the next phase of the implementation for PSP v2 goes, there was a concern around identifying the Windows ports at the API level. Like one of the things that came up was like in the restrictive mode, if we are applying non-judiciously Linux-specific security constraints to a Windows port, how do we eliminate that? Like as of now, our go-to approach is let it land on a kubelet, and on the kubelet side, we're going to strip off Linux-specific security constraints. But there are certain distributions like OpenShift where we try to apply everything at the admission level, at the pod admission level, even before it reaches kubelet. So identifying the pod, a Windows pod or a Linux pod at that level would be beneficial. And even community is also moving in the same direction. So I would like to know if you guys are fine with using runtime classes as the official way, because that's what the community seems to be going with, or at least the API folks seem to be going with.
Yeah, so I think the same idea is still gonna apply, where it would come in like because I think you did the PR to strip out the fields for like the Linux specific fields in the kubelet, and so the same idea is going to apply. It would be allowed in, and then if kubelet doesn't check those fields or removes them because it knows it's Windows, then the pod would still be scheduled and apply through there. As far as like an OS specific field, it was identified that we definitely need this OS specific field. That's going to require a KEP and I think quite a bit of investigation on how to make that work and implement it, which if anybody's looking for a big contribution, that's a good opportunity.
Yeah, to be clear, we might not even need the OS specific field within the pod spec, right? We can actually get away with just the runtime classes, because if the runtime class has like within the scheduling constraints, if it has got the host name, sorry, the OS as Windows and the required tolerations, we can identify that it is a Windows specific port.
Well, but I think that comes down to where you can bypass it with the node selector. So if you were to schedule if you had the runtime class and you had all those fields like the Windows specific fields in the runtime class, if you specified a node name on the pod template, and it was Linux, you would bypass those runtime classes as long as there's a runtime class with that name on the Linux node. And so that's kind of the Docker shim situation and concern. And so I think
that will be a problem for Linux as well. Like specifying the node name within the pod spec, that will be a problem anywhere to bypass the scheduler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you put OS equal to Windows or something like that, it's not going to solve the problem.
Right.
And Ravi, is your question around whether we should be using runtime classes for scheduling or for identifying Windows nodes?
For identifying Windows nodes.
Yeah, so right now we're like the way the PSP is written for alpha, we're not necessarily identifying Windows nodes. We're applying the same, like the same type of restriction or exemption using runtime classes. So we're not saying that that actually identifies the pod as Windows or any other type of OS. It's just that the runtime class, you'll be exempt from the runtime class.
Yeah,
or
but
you'll be exempt from those policies if you have that particular runtime class.
Right, but when PSP becomes default, like say if it reaches beta, or sorry, GA, I believe, it was mentioned that we will apply restricted as the default profile going forward. As of now in alpha, it's going to be the first profile. I forgot the name of the profile. But when it becomes restricted, that is where it will be a problem, where we would reject the pod at the admission plugin level if it does not meet the security standards that are defined. Like if it's not having specific SECs, it would be rejected if it is restricted, if the profile chosen is restricted.
Yeah,
so the main point I'm trying to make is, like, by the time we reach that stage, we should be clear in saying to the API folks that, hey, we can clearly identify a Windows pod using this mechanism. It can be either the OS field within the pod spec, say if we go with that approach, or with the runtime classes.
Yes, I agreed. And they called that out in the CAP as the next steps for reevaluating, moving towards beta and alpha, stable.
Yeah, I just want to bring this up. We do not have to make a call now, but I think as a community, we need to agree upon what should be the way to identify a Windows pod. Like, if it is OS field, we need to introduce it. Like, I'm fine with it, but I just want to make sure that all of us are in agreement before we go that route.
Absolutely. I don't know if anybody else in the community has any preferences or particular directions they'd like to see this move.
I mean, given that we've been suggesting that we use runtime classes, I mean, for scheduling purposes, we should try and just, piggyback on that for this purpose also, rather than introducing yet another method or yet another way, at least for the PSP purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been using runtime classes since I pretty much started on Windows nodes, and I think it allows you to kind of bunch together a load of things that you might not necessarily remember to do. So like taints, and if you ever tainted a node or whatever, you could put all that in the runtime class and save the complications. So I quite like it as a personal opinion, but.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like using runtime classes is to me personally preferable. But at the same time, we have been in the documentation, we have been recommending that you can go with the node selector plus tolerations, or you can go with the runtime classes. If you want to make runtime classes as the way to identify Windows pods, perhaps we need to call that out in the documentation.
Maybe this plays into the way we define conformance for Windows too, right? Because the problem is like EKS, I don't think by default EKS puts I forget, but I know some clusters give you the runtime class and some don't. I don't think EKS gives you one for free, but I think AKS does, right, James? I don't know.
No, we don't. Yeah.
You don't either? Okay. So like, I mean, this kind of is like, okay, well, neither EKS nor AKS by this definition would work out of the box in this way. And I think that's okay, because we could tell AKS and EKS and whoever else that, like, look, if you're a real Windows cluster and you're actually running Windows pods, then by definition, you have to have a runtime class for that defined.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what's in the damn runtime class, but it's got to be there, right? Or something like that. And if you don't do that, then I don't think we can make this call on this definition, right?
Yeah, I think naming them also, we'd have to say this is a standard name and for Windows, and then how do you apply that across the different OSs and versions, and how do you add additional runtimes that you might want to implement? So I think there's more to be explored there, but I also want to make sure we time box this. So we'll take 1 or 2 more comments, and then because I see we have a node problem detector demo at the end here too. I'd like to have time for that.
Yeah, perhaps we can come back and discuss this. Like I started a Slack thread. We can discuss there.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I already did that on Kubernetes Slack last week, so we can perhaps continue the discussion there.
Yeah, let's do that there, and then maybe we can talk about it and reserve some more time next week.
Yeah,
it's a good discussion to be having. Anybody else want to add anything else?
For the caps, I also want to mention CSI proxy. We plan to go to GA, and right now I'm updating the CSI Windows support cap to include GA qualification questionnaire. So if anyone like interested, want to take a look, review it, please. And also, is there a spreadsheet to keep track of SIG Windows caps? I just want to put CSI proxy there too.
Yeah, there's one big spreadsheet that we should make sure it's added. I know that we have post process and log viewer there, but we should make sure that's there. So I will follow up with you after SIG Windows here.
Sure. So over Slack or?
Yeah, via Slack.
Okay. So I think my Slack ID is Jing, JINGXU97. No, sorry.
Spreadsheet. I posted it on chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you'll have access to edit it. I think the leads.
Yeah, the SIG leads will have access.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
sorry, my Slack. Okay.
I'll see if I can add it, and if I need any information, I'll reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, my Slack is JINXU, not.
Cool. All right, so Windows containers issues.
Yeah, so I can speak about this. So basically, we're still seeing an issue where the pod gets into like this crash loop back off from these weird issues, and there's been multiple attempts to fix this bug, but it comes back, and I think it's coming back in different ways. There is no repro yet that we can share that we can reproduce it internally at Google, but that's one thing we'll be working on, is trying to get like a small repro that that we can push back up. But this is something that happens quite often, is when we kill, or we try to I believe delete the container, and it gets stuck in this mode, and it can't like delete a file or something like that.
Oh yeah, I think I fixed the bug like this in 121. I remember seeing something like this, and we were seeing it in our end-to-end tests, and then it went away. I'll see if I can dig it up, but if you can repo it, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so we've seen it, and then like we have customers that are hitting it in later versions than after what the patches were specified.
Okay.
So you mentioned you fixed this in 121.
I thought I remember seeing this in 120 at one point, and then I haven't seen it in the logs since then. And there was a set of access to like log that I think was fixed, but I don't remember specifically. So.
Do you mind putting the pull request for that and see if we could patch, so we can see if we can patch it in and see if we can still repro it with our internal testing?
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
Okay, that'd be much appreciated.
Sorry, I just want to confirm the fix is in Kubernetes or in Docker?
Yeah, I think it was in Kubernetes.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Michelle, I think, do you have enough? Is 5 minutes enough time to do a node?
Oh yeah,
detector
plenty.
demo?
Plenty. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, I might have to give you access. Hold on 1 second. Okay, you should have access now.
Let me try. Yes. Are you all able to see my screen? You should see like a Chrome tab and PowerShell script.
Yeah.
Page. All right, cool. So this is a simple, this is a Windows node that I'm running with the NPD service that Jeremy had built up and integrated with this Windows build. And so basically you can see it if you were to look at get service to see that no problem detector is running. This is our dashboard where the node problems are being reported to Prometheus, and it gets reported and spit out to these to this metrics page. And so I'll go through like a simple demo where, for example, if we were to look and see that kubelet, for example, stops running, you'll see this counter increase to see that it's failed. And then you'll also notice, because the cooldown was longer than a minute or so, when you look at the kubelet, it's automatically repaired itself. And so if you were to, if it was to fail within less than a minute, our cooldown period for at least kubelet is a minute or so. You see that it stopped, and it will basically wait for that time for, it's basically checking every 10 seconds to detect if this thing's working for kubelet, the health of kubelet, health of containerd, health of, we added some more features as well in the newer versions like kubeproxy, but I don't have that to show you today. And we use this health endpoint to check the health of kubelet. And so since it's down, you wouldn't see it working. But then when it starts to repair itself and auto repair, this should start working within a few more seconds or so. And this would also increment here. So it should be running. We should be able to hit this endpoint now. Okay. So this is a very simple demo of MPD running as a service. You can take a look at event logs to see. We use the win events to determine when things were last run. To see, we use the kubeproxy for the health endpoints to check when it's up and running. For containerd, we use like PS, and same with Docker. If Docker was running on here, it's either Docker or containerd. But that's the demo for MPD. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. This is like a very minimal viable product that we have. We're planning to add more features as we go.
I have a few questions. Is it just basically trying to see if the service is up or not, and if it's down, it will try to bring it up again? Or is it also trying to do some root cause analysis on why the service failed in the first place?
So MPD is more of just a detector. It doesn't look into super extensive details and stuff. For now, with the things that you're looking at, the repair stuff, that's with our custom plugin Health Checker. And Health Checker will basically give a allows you to configure it to either try to auto repair it, but it detects to see when that critical service is down and then tries to bring it back up. There are some other custom plugins that we're going to have to create for Windows specific problems that we're going to detect that we know we won't necessarily be repairing, but it'll be more of reporting to Prometheus, and those services are people who are actually using and consuming MPD, and looking at this data will actually then act accordingly. But it basically will just say, hey, this node's unhealthy, and basically try to stop scheduling new things onto it.
And another question I have, is it only looking for problems in kubelet or any other associated service like containerd or Docker or CNI or so on and so forth?
Yep. So the newer version so far we have, and if you look at GitHub, we're monitoring kubelet, we're monitoring containerd. If Docker is running, we were monitoring Docker. We added kuproxy. We're now looking to Windows Defender. I'm working on that currently now. And then we have a bunch of other things that are on the list that you can take a look in the design doc that was posted last week or so. Let me see if I can find it and send it to the group in a bit. But there's a lot of proposed items that we want to detect. I know Jeremy is also working on porting over or simply port a basic of the metrics. That's the doc there. Yeah, does that answer your question?
So I'm not 100% familiar with node problem detector, but I have seen, for example, for OpenStack deployments with Kubernetes on Magnum, they have Magnum auto healer something, which basically destroys the node in OpenStack and recreates it entirely through heat. So I think this that's an extreme version of this, I think. But I think if this can become even more versatile than that one, I think it would be a really great feature to have.
It probably would play into the machine health checks stuff for cluster API, Claudio. So like, I don't know if machine health, I don't know what the extension model for machine health checks are, but you're right. Like you could potentially use the node. I'm sure they've talked about this, right? I'm sure that the folks trying to build machine health checks are looking into this idea of how to use node problem detector. I'm gonna search for that actually right now.
Technically, for the Linux node problem detector, they integrate with the remedy system. Like they have a recommendation system and a remedy system. The recommendation is what I think is being presented now. It can be integrated into a remedy system like a cluster autoscaler or something like that. That's how it works on the Linux side, at least.
Okay. What was the system?
Yeah. Also, like there are some metrics and stuff like that. So as it stands right now for Windows, it's as Michelle said before, it's very minimal viable product. So a lot of the features that Linux has are being backported to or ported over to Windows. And so all of the tie-ins and stuff like that already exist for the Linux side. We expect some of those to also be online when the Windows ports happen. But yeah, certain things like recovery of nodes and stuff like that, you know, if the node becomes bad because like containerd gets corrupted or something like that, is one of the benefits of having this.
A more specific question I have. Do you also have something like disk auto cleanup, for example? That could be another possible problem, especially when dealing with Windows images, and especially since new Windows layers are being published every single month due to security concerns. You might end up with dozens of unused images, and which would fill up your entire disk. So wondering if that could be also added as a possible thing to detect with node problem detector.
Jeremy, did your metrics cover that disk detection stuff?
So disk space and all that is covered in the metrics. Like that was just submitted yesterday. Let me pull up the PR for that. But These types, so we've been trying to get feedback on like what kind of things to look for. If you do have suggestions and want to contribute, of course, the design document that's linked there is a good place to put those suggestions. And, of course, you can just implement it. On a second, let me get the metrics. And the PR has a basic dump of the metrics that you'll see. Some of them are zeroed out because they're not supported, but like disk space used and all that is definitely there.
That's awesome then.
Is this easy to, like, if you're a vendor and you want to extend this with your own opinionated, I'm sure everybody's thinking the same thing, right? Like, okay, we've got some specific stuff that isn't generic. So like, what's the extension model? I haven't read the KEP, so I know this is a dumb question probably, but.
So it's a good question. Basically in the config directory, there's like these JSON files, and you could basically write some scripts for the stuff that you want to detect. And you basically tell the JSON file, hey, run this script at whatever interval, and success fail, depending on how you want to report that for the script. And, that plumbs into like whatever these counters are here. So you can say, for the recovery, that's not as clear. I would have to follow up with.
So I can write a PowerShell script and there's something running on the kubelet if I run this. So when
some of these problems are detected with PowerShell. In fact, Michelle's current PR is using PowerShell to detect. I think. What was it again, Michelle?
The Windows Defender threat detector.
So how do you run it as a service? I was kind of distracted at the beginning of your demo, so I might have missed it. But the problem detector is running as a NSSM service or as a container or what?
As a service.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. We are 5 minutes over, so thank you so much, Michelle, for coming and showing us that, and Jeremy for helping. I think you initially brought the issue, so thank you. Very cool. If there's any other questions, we can follow up in Slack. Otherwise,
yeah, thanks for the demo. This is really cool.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Cool. And so I think that kind of concludes the end of the standard, regularly scheduled SIG Windows meeting, and then I'll hand it off to Jay to do after hours, where we do kind of informal pair programming and mentorship.
I wouldn't call myself a mentor. I would not copy me in any way, but we can pair program. So, okay, who's here today?
I'm going to stop the recording. So
okay,
let's see.
Cool.